View from the Gutters, Episode 13. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Incognito. And, to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip ahead to 3244. Alright, welcome to View from the Gutters, episode 13.
13, lucky 13.
13, lucky.
Super lucky 13.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
Yep, pretty good. We've already been talking for like an hour before we recorded about other things, but now we're all just tired. So this one might be a little dull. No, it won't. I guarantee it won't be.
Well, it's going to be amazing because I'm back. And
right.
You chuckleheads can't go off on like hour-long tangents.
Yeah, you missed the last episode. It was good.
Yeah, you recorded without me.
Yeah.
You jerk.
I love that, though. It was like an hour and a half of us just shitting around.
It was 90 minutes. It was a 90-minute long meditation on why we should not be allowed to record without Toby here. That's what it is. That's what it really is.
We were just super off topic. That could happen. That could happen to any podcast. Even veterans.
How many times did we say, "Oh, gotta drink my piss"? I mean,
eat your arm and watch the robots fucking.
How many times did you say puppet sodomy?
I said it quite a bit. I said it quite a bit.
Yeah, it was bad. Go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. You should have, because they go in order.
They go in order. Yes, it's true. It's true. But no, none of that stuff today. Yeah. I'm not going to say it again. None of that stuff. We're here.
We're on topic.
We are on topic.
We have another anomaly tonight. This is the first time that we've ever picked a book, and then the person who recommended it wasn't here to talk about it.
That's true.
So let's introduce ourselves. I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Joe Preti.
Cade Reynolds.
Tobiah Panshin.
All right, we're Matless.
Yeah, no Matt, no Grant.
Matless and Oli? Yeah. I don't know. Is that a movie title?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Now
let's go.
All right.
Willing to go.
We don't need those guys anyway.
We don't need them.
Dead weight.
Yeah.
This is the crew we had my first episode.
I like the rotating panel again. Yeah, it's always been fun. But I dig this kind of stuff. But anyway, Matt recommended a book to us. Incognito. Yep. And we didn't read it, so he's not here. No, we did. We read it.
I mean, I read it all today, so.
I did too. I read it right before we recorded.
I read it yesterday.
I forget if I don't read it right before we record, like, honestly.
Yeah. What was that about again?
Literally, like, if I read it a week before, it's gone out of my head. When we kept moving podcasts around, like, we would have to move it a week later. I had to read the book, like, 4 times.
Usually I read them twice.
Yeah.
Just because I want to read it once just to absorb it, and then again to kind of pick out some details that I want to talk about. I didn't do that this time.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, let's do our usual around the table. What do you guys think? Initial thoughts kind of thing. Joe, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I like this. I thought this is an area where Brubaker really shines. Is doing this kind of pulpy. In the afterwards of one of the books, he talks about Donald Westlake and the influence Donald Westlake had on him. Who wrote books under the pseudonym Richard Stark, and he wrote the Parker books, which are really noir, pulp, really good stuff, really heavily influenced by people like Ross MacDonald and Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, and it really has that feel to it. It's dark, it's a dirty world, and these are dirty people we're talking about.
It's also got that, like, the pulp influence isn't just in the, like, detective fiction area.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely some Doc Samson.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And some, like,
The Shadow.
Science and magic kind of, like, mad scientist kind of stuff going on, too, for
sure. Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely a love letter to that era of making stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it. I think at first I was kind of, I didn't really know what to expect, but as I read it, it definitely grew on me, and I kind of found myself enjoying the direction it took. I was definitely, I was pleased with the end of the 6th issue.
Yeah.
So I liked it. And I think it's what Brubaker does well, which is really, and I mean, Sean Phillips wrote it with him, but I think together they really did a good job. I don't think they pulled any punches, but I didn't feel at any point that it was like overly dark, like we had spoken about on Empire, where sometimes it felt really, really dark and gritty.
Dark for the sake of dark.
Dark, yeah. And I never really felt that way with this. Like I felt that it was a very natural progression would happen.
Yeah. So. In a way, it kind of almost felt lighthearted in some parts because it's like it's not overly dark, and in a weird way, like the art in Empire is so bright and cheerful, in the coloring and in the lines, like being really clean, and then that book is like oppressively dark in places, but the art you wouldn't notice if you looked at the art. You know, it's like similar to like a Superman DC book or something.
It's odd to me how this book almost at times seemed to have a sense of whimsy to it.
Yeah, no, it did seem whimsical.
Just the attitude of the main character and the way that he just does not like. 90% of things he doesn't care about. I don't want to say he doesn't care about anything. Right. It's kind of like he's got this one thing that he cares about. And as long as he's got that, he kind of has this carefree, happy-go-lucky, like, nothing else matters because I got the thing that I need.
Right, right.
Attitude about him.
Well, and I really like the fact that they don't whitewash him. They don't they don't kind of, bad guy, now a good guy. He's not, it's like, no. Make no mistake, this is still a bad guy.
Well, nothing's really changed for him, you know, with the exception of the death of his brother. You know?
Yeah, like exactly.
He's still kind of a fucked up guy.
Yeah.
With good reason.
But at the same time, definitely with good reason.
Fucked up.
Right.
But at the same time, like, he was never, you kind of get the feeling that he was, like, never, like, super fucked up. Like, he was just killing people because it was what he did.
Yeah,
exactly. It was easy, and he didn't have to work at it, and it's what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And now he's a file clerk because that's what he's supposed to do. And when they pose the question to him, like, when you got your powers back, why didn't you run away? He's like, I don't know. This is what I do now. Yeah. He's like, he's not super deep intellectually.
Yeah, that's,
you know?
He's never been a person who's been driven to do anything.
Right.
I mean, he kind of had a path laid out for him from childhood. Yeah. And he did that until he was physically forced to stop. Mm-hmm. And then he did what the people who captured him told him to do.
Yeah. Right.
And then when he finally got his powers back, and he's like, I can do anything. I have no idea what I want.
And the book ends basically with that. Like, what are you going to do next? No.
Yeah.
Like, which is a good end for that character because, it also leaves open-ended, like, what's going to happen next. But in the same way, it's like that character has no idea what life is about.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know.
Well, this brings me to kind of another thing I really liked. I like the file clerk thing because it's totally, I read this. This is not me. I'm not this smart. Totally a nod to Harvey Pekar there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But I felt this book gave me just enough of everything. I didn't feel that anything was skimped on or anything was gratuitous. I felt like it was a very neatly wrapped package. And everything you got was exactly what you needed to get out of that story. And I think that it's hard to do that because you can give too much and it feels maybe like you're being pandered to, or it feels a little gratuitous, or you don't get enough and it feels maybe like they're trying too hard to be mysterious, or they... so being subtle is difficult, and I think that, I agree, I think there was just enough of all these different things going on, and there was sometimes this whimsical kind of thing, and there was darkness, and there was kind of camaraderie, but at no point did anything feel like it was too much or too little, or that I was being pandered to, or being kind of forced to be like, oh, I'm spooky and mysterious. I thought everything was handled really well.
Cade, what are your initial thoughts on it?
At first, I didn't like it. The first couple of issues, it felt a little too dark and gritty. It hit its stride between issue 3 or 4. I don't even remember. I mean, I did take a couple days break in between reading the halves. But to me, what really stood out is the story. I loved the story. The witness protection thing with the bad guy who has the good side. You think, that's in all of us. There's good and there's bad in everybody. And at the same time, it kind of gave me the feeling that of when I first read Who Killed Retro Girl, the original Powers thing, which I absolutely loved. And so once I kind of got that vibe from the story, I was just like, this is fucking amazing. And it kind of kept going from there. We had the 50-year-old woman who looked like she was 16 and had all the powers, and then
Eva, what was her name?
Eva Destruction.
Eva Destruction. Yeah, that's a great name.
And then you have her, and you kind of see his inner turmoil. Like, I don't really like her, but at the same time, I don't want to leave her behind. Now that she's old and can't fend for herself, he doesn't. And she dies in his arms and everything. And it to me was really powerful. And then and it kept going through beating his alter ego clone up. And the whole ripping out the heart, to be honest, I didn't know if I had one.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
At the end. It fell together, and the story was perfect.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of the odd man out here, and I'm kind of glad that Brant isn't here, because after our conversation about Empire, I know that he would give me shit about not liking it because it was dark. And actually, the reason that I didn't like it isn't because it was dark. I started off being kind of like, I don't know about this. It's not really my thing. And as I was reading it, I started to get more and more into it. And I really started to enjoy it. And there was one moment that absolutely killed the entire story for me. And this is a spoiler, just in case you haven't read it. Yeah. You should know by now that we're going to spoil it.
We do that every episode.
The major revelation at the end of the book is that he is a clone or a duplicate or something of a hero. And that's kind of used as I don't want to say excuse, but a validation kind of him being not a villain, doing heroic things.
I thought that guy, the guy that died, Lazarus, was a villain.
No, he was a hero.
No, he was definitely a hero.
Yeah, because the villains destroyed him. And
but I thought they were like turf warring.
No. He was a hero who had been injured in a fight, and they came upon him, and they killed him and found his lab.
Yeah.
And took all of his body
duplicates. Because he worked with Dr. Zeppelin.
Well, he looks just like...
the Shadow.
To me, he looked like the Red Hood.
I think you mean the Hood. The DC guy is the Red Hood. Yeah, the Marvel guy is the Hood.
The Hood, and he's got the guns.
And he does look like the
Red Hood. Yeah, he looks like that.
The idea that, like, oh, okay, so you're actually the clone of a hero, so it's okay for you to be this heroic character. I liked it much better when it was like, you're a villain. You were a villain. You were trained to be a villain, and now that you kind of have your own agency, you're deciding to be something better than that. And I liked that story.
Yeah.
And with the addition of that one element, it really killed to me because it had this, it smacked of determinism, I guess. Well, the idea that, like, being good is in your blood.
Yeah.
Until you were born to be.
They do hint, though, that he might have some kind of, like, genetic memory that, like, Eva Destruction was hoping that he remembered how to make the lab work. Like, if he saw it, like, something would come back to him. So they've hinted at, like, maybe he has some kind of genetic memory. And, like, I think she learned that probably from the brother.
Right.
I forget what his name is.
Xander,
yeah. That, like, through talking to him, because he knew that he was a clone.
Right.
That she, like, kind of was hoping that he had some kind of previous knowledge or something. And so, I guess, I could see reading into it as determinism. But for me, it was, like, a weird... I don't know, it was more like a genetic memory, or like, because Lazarus used to move his consciousness into the next body somehow.
Yeah.
And they never explained how.
Was he a reincarnation? Like, were those bodies more than just clones? Like, it kind of added to the mystery element of, like, who fucking knows what that shit was?
What's really funny about that is, the first thing I thought of when I saw those vats with those bodies floating in them, is the fucking Venture Brothers. I was like, oh my god, it's Hank and Dean. Right?
I thought of Venture Brothers like 100 times during this book, mostly because I always do. But like their dad, Rusty Venture.
Dr. Zeppelin.
He's a lot like Dr. Zeppelin because they're both based on a similar character, which is Doc Samson.
Right.
You don't mean Doc Samson, you mean Doc Savage.
Doc Savage. Sorry, I said Doc Samson before too. Doc Savage.
I think what did it for me was that the line where he's saying that he would transfer his consciousness into the bodies, because that made it feel like, to me, like he was escaping overkill from that whole, you came from a hero, so of course you'll return to it. I think, or at least that's what it felt like to me. Because
even if it was some kind of transferred memory or residual whatever, I still feel like it reduces the overall agency of the character to decide for himself, this is what I want.
Well, and I think that the interesting thing about at the end of the book when, what's her name? Zeppelin's daughter, Zoe. Yeah, Zoe asks him, like, what is he going to do next? And he doesn't know. It's interesting that she suddenly trusts him after killing his brother, but the reasoning that he gives for killing his brother and going against the Black Death is not because he's a hero now, but because if Black Death gets out, they'll hunt him forever.
Which is actually funny because I peeked ahead a little bit because there was another series after this.
Bad influences.
Where he is working for the SOS as a hero.
And I kind of was
he's not a very good hero, but still.
I'm kind of hoping that at some point, he does kind of go out on his own and, they have to come bring him in again and it brings out some more of his villainous traits. Yeah. Because he's not really decided one way or the other at the end of the book, and that's what I really liked, is he's not really a hero. He definitely has a soft spot in him. He's gone soft, as David Destruction calls it.
Well, but I don't necessarily think that it's heroic to kill people, even if they're bad people.
I kind of feel like he has this heroic instinct to him that he's fighting against because of his upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he doesn't think that all people deserve to die. Like that, but he does think that some people do deserve to die. And that's not exactly heroic. But it's not exactly villainous either. It's what Cade was saying, there's a little of both in everybody, and it's not black and white.
There certainly is a lot of ambivalence in the story.
And I think that that's what makes him a more interesting character than, someone who was pre-fated and is like, now I am hero, he never says that.
Well, yeah, that's what they didn't, they didn't
do that, and
they didn't whitewash him. They didn't you came from a hero. No, it's like, oh, I could kill you, but I'm not going to. It's like, no, I'm going to fucking rip your fucking... I'm going to fucking beat your face in and then rip your heart out.
He's still pretty brutal.
Yeah, and that's kind of... But I think it's a point that I had not thought of before, and I think it's an interesting one because I wonder... I'm just finding myself wondering now how determinism is this kind of subtle thing and I wonder how much more of it is going on there now than... This whole, you were meant to do this. I'm like, bullshit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I hate that whole idea because I think unless it's done really, really well, it's bullshit, right? It's like...
Well, I hate that whole, you are the one destined champion. You have to do this, you alone. Not because you want to, not because you've tried or you have, some special skill. It's because you're the destined hero. You're the son of the king. Yeah. You're the one person with the magic touch who can do this thing.
You found the magical item XYZ.
The Randall Thor syndrome, if you will. Yeah. Where it's this one asshole, no matter how much of a dick he is the one guy that we can get to do this, and he's going to be a whiny little bitch about
Thomas Covenant.
Link, in Legend of Zelda video games, every time you're reborn as the hero of you now have to take up the mantle of the hero of time, and you're just this little kid who can't talk. I don't know what's going on. So.
I like my heroes to be people who said, yes, I'm going to stand up for what's right. I'm going to do this, even if it's hard.
Right.
Even if I don't know I'm going to succeed. But this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to put all that I have on the table to do it.
That's because that's compelling.
But but it kind of makes you think, when he does get his powers back and he goes out and starts saving people, you see so much humanity in him that, maybe he is in the back of his mind, maybe he's trying to atone for what he did in the past.
See, I get the sense that he's just...
I would believe that, and I would be fine with that. Like I said, I wanted this to be a good story. I was liking it up until that moment that I think retroactively killed all of that for me.
Right.
Now that I liked it when he colors things differently.
Well, I like it when he was like, I don't know why I'm saving people. I just do it. Yeah. And even at the end, I still feel like he's kind of like that, but I totally understand why... having him pre-fated being a clone of a hero could change that. Could color him as
I totally agree. That's think it's not something that I thought about before, and now it does make me think. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of like one of those things where it could have gone any number of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and even though this way that it turned out isn't, what people, mainly Tobiah here, wanted it to be, to me at least, it was a decent ending.
Yeah.
The other thing is just as a criticism of the book in general, none of the characters were really super compelling as characters. They weren't anything I hadn't seen before. They were all pretty cut out. It was really like, look, this is an interesting world we're building, and we're going to tell a story about a character you may or may not have read before.
Right.
But none of the characters, well, and like a lot of them just aren't well developed at all because they're only in panels for like 4 pages, you know.
I hated Amanda.
Yeah, like Amanda and just like I think Zoe Zeppelin is not really well.
Well, you don't get really any sense of the heroes. I mean, the heroes themselves kind of seem like assholes. I mean, they're talking about how Dr. Zeppelin was like mind raping people to be not villains anymore.
Well, sometimes you have to mind rape people, you know.
That just happens.
It happens.
I think that
Batman's done it a number of times.
Well, it's been done to him a number of times too.
I think that this is a comic that could have been 12 issues.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think that it's interesting to me to wonder, okay, well, are they sowing seeds so that they can come back and pick those things up in the future? But that's one of those things that until it happens, it's like hard to know because then it's hard to know if that's a good choice or not because you have to see how it develops. So yeah, I think I agree with you. They could have easily gone 12 issues.
Well, and it's just back to the point of like really, you know, kind of cardboard characters is like the mad scientist character.
Yeah.
Like, is the mad scientist character.
Well,
the Nick Fury character is the Nick Fury character. The big bad Doomsday character, like, is that, you know, like they're nothing more than that because the story isn't about them.
Yeah, and I feel like this is another nod to the pulp, hard-boiled style of fiction, which is stripped down, bare bones. And I think maybe that's why it was a little bit... I didn't mind that too much. I really feel like this is Overkill. What's his name? Zane Overkill? Is that his name? Zach Overkill. He's Parker in the beginning, and he becomes Marlowe at the end. He's not a good guy by any stretch, but he's a better guy.
Yeah, well, he just doesn't kill everyone.
Yeah.
He kills... He makes a choice about who he kills.
Yeah.
And when he was teamed up with his brother... I feel like he didn't ever think about, like, oh, should I kill these people or not? Like, it just never came into his head.
They specifically say, like, his brother was the one who was the thinker.
Right.
Zach was not going on upstairs. He was just going along with the flow.
Right.
And I wonder if that's,
I think, initial thoughts for me was, like, I've enjoyed the story. It was a fun ride. The art's awesome. I love the art.
I loved the art.
It's the same kind of stuff.
The character design I really liked.
My only problem is there's 2 blonde women in the story, and for the first half of the story, I didn't realize they were 2 separate characters.
Yeah.
Wait, there's Amanda, the bitch at the work.
Right.
Who's the other blonde that
Eva Destruction.
You had them confused?
Well, I thought they were the same. I was like, is she undercover? And like now she's not. I was like,
I don't understand how you could confuse those.
Their faces look identical.
Yeah, but they've got completely different hairstyles.
Oh my god. It's a comic book and this happens a lot where it's like, who's that guy? Oh, it's that guy that was just talking. Wait, they're talking to himself? Is he talking to a mirror? Oh no, those are 2 different guys.
I've read comics where the characters are way harder to distinguish.
No, and it didn't take me.
Read Queen and Country, and some of the artists on that, it's like, wait, who are these people again? There's 2 guys with the same haircut.
I have that problem.
One's wearing like a 2-piece suit, and the other's wearing a 3-piece suit, and I can't tell the goddamn difference between them.
Walking Dead, that happens to me sometimes.
Who did Preacher? Who drew Preacher? Steve Dillon. Steve Dillon. Outside of Preacher, he draws 3 fucking characters, and that's it. Like, he did a Bullseye special. I can't remember who wrote it. He did a Bullseye miniseries, and I'm like, oh, it's Jesse Custer. And there he is again, and there he is again, and there he is again. It's like,
as much as I love him, John Cassidy is one of those guys who draws the same face a lot.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading quickly, and I'm like, just reading through the story, and then I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening? Why? And it was just like because the Amanda character is like such a bitch, and then the Eva just comes in and like fucking shoots somebody. I'm like, oh, that's interesting that she's like also undercover at his work.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, is she keeping tabs on him for the enemy organization? Which I'm like, that's kind of an interesting story, but not in the book at all. Like making up a different story as the book goes along because I can't tell characters apart.
Right.
But the art is really good, and I like it. And it's gritty, and the coloring is nice, and it lends itself really well to the story that's being told.
I really
fits it well.
Yeah. I really like how simple the character design was. They didn't go over the top. Yeah. They didn't design a whole bunch of garish costumes. It's very understated and simple, and I love that. I love that approach.
The superheroes and the villains are somewhat indistinguishable, like who is villainous and who is super heroic, which is part of the story. Yeah, absolutely. And so that to me lent itself really well because I'm reading Rising Stars on Brant's recommendations from a couple weeks ago, and I finished the first volume. And one of the cool things I like about that is it's hard to tell who's a villain and who's a hero because they purposefully put them in alternating costumes. They put some of the villainous characters in very heroic looking costumes, and they put some of the heroes in very what could be construed as villainous costumes. Yeah. So they're kind of playing with that, and it works. It's interesting in that book, and it works in a very different way than it does in this book. And I like the way that they did it in this book, where it's kind of hard to tell who's a villain and who's a hero.
But one thing that I did not like about the art in this comic is that I totally could not tell that Ava Destruction was supposed to be 16.
Right.
No, she does not look like
that. Happens in comic books all the time, though, when it's X23, guess an age, 28, 14.
I don't play the guess the comic book character's age
not game. Close. Yeah, it's hard.
It is.
But at least they said it in the book. Otherwise, I'd have been really confused when it came up later. At least they just kept mentioning that she's 16 over and over again, so I wouldn't forget. But, I mean, I don't know. It's hard, though, too, because Romita Jr. does such a good job of it in Kick-Ass, making everybody look their age.
I haven't actually read that.
Oh, Kick-Ass? It's pretty good. But his art in there is really, they look like they're in high school, and she looks like she's 8 years old. Hit Girl looks, really young, and so it was something that this book definitely could have done better, make their age, make her look 16. Yeah. And not in her mid-20s.
I agree.
It also makes that whole dynamic a lot creepier.
Yeah, which I think...
when I first read it, I was like, that's a little weird.
That's a little creepy.
It's a little weird. But it doesn't feel weird when you're reading it, when you're looking at it, because it's, she looks 20-something.
24, 25.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I think that would have definitely colored my reaction to her in a different way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I like her as a character... because you're not supposed to, she's a good character because she's kind of repulsive as a person, she just indiscriminately kills everyone, is kind of this sex crazed lunatic now in her 50-year-old.
She lives up to her name.
Well, she's in her, her mind is 50 and her body is 16, and that just fucks a person up, I think.
Yeah.
That would fuck anybody up.
Pretty considerably, I would
badly.
Assume. Pretty considerably, I would assume.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you guys want to add to?
No,
I think that covers it.
I think I'd recommend it, but I think that it's definitely not my favorite work that either of these two have done.
I wouldn't universally recommend it, but there are people to whom I would recommend it.
Yeah. I think it's...
Yeah, I mean, if you're into noir and you like pulpy things, then I would check it out. If you like more straightforward stuff. If you don't like ambiguity and you like clear-cut, good guy, bad guy, that's fine. We're not judging you. We are judging you.
And to be honest, another thing I feel about this is this kind of thing has been done better in other stories.
Yeah,
the ambiguity.
I was reading the whole part where he's fighting his duplicate. I was looking at this and going, Invincible did this better.
Yeah, and just the other thing is that has a plot hole in it right there because they're they feel everything that each other is feeling. So when he rips the heart out of himself, he should have not really physically been able to do it, right? Because the excruciating pain. But not to be that would never happen. That part was
I think you just
feels. Come on, Chard. No, into your nerd rage.
Yeah, well, he feels he's all right, there's only one person that can take this guy down. Me, who is going to feel every punch I land. Wait a minute. You should let someone else fight this guy, and you should go as far away as possible so you don't also die. That, I don't know. It felt weird, and...
He should have at least passed out from the pain of ripping his own heart out.
He's I'm fine, let's go.
Well, I mean, maybe the second that he rips the guy's heart out and he dies, that connection goes away. Right. So it only hurts for a second.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's pulling off a Band-Aid or ripping your own heart out.
Right. It just felt weird for a minute. But I think that the ambiguity the ambiguity of like whether a character is good or bad is actually done really well in a series called G.I. Joe Cobra. So everyone should go read that. I'm gonna slide that recommendation under the table. No, I'm sliding it under the table.
Is that the one where they actually got Larry Hama to come back and do it?
No, that was like all American heroes.
Because there's like a part because I read G.I. Joe and Transformers growing up. Like those were the comics that I read, and I know that they brought both of those comics back in multiple forms. And I go to the comic shop and I look at like Transformers. And there's like 10 different Transformers titles. Yeah. And I have no idea what the hell is going on.
Yeah, and G.I. Joe is a lot like that. Where like some of them are in the old continuity, some of them aren't. They're in the new.
And I've seen both like Larry Hama and Simon Furman, who wrote Transformers for a large part of its run. I've seen their names on new issues. Right. And there's a part of me that kind of wants to check that out, but I look at it and I'm like, I don't know where to start.
I'm not a G.I. Joe fan, so if I'm mistaken, I apologize. But I think the case is that the Larry Hama stuff for IDW is a continuation of the Marvel continuity. Okay. So if you read those, the numbering continues from the Marvel numbering, and the story continues from the Marvel numbering, where the other IDW G.I. Joe stuff is a reboot not related to either the Marvel or the Devil's Due publishing. Right. G.I. Joe. Okay. And that's what I think how that breaks down, because IDW also did a reboot once they got the property. And G.I. Joe Cobra is part of that IDW, but it doesn't tie into the main continuity of any of the other G.I. Joe books at IDW, because I've never read another G.I. Joe book besides Cobra. And Cobra's really good. It's like undercover Chuckles, who's a Joe, who wears the Hawaiian shirt, goes undercover with a new terrorist organization, and that is Cobra. And so it's just this whole like, he kind of loses himself in his cover.
So it's kind of like alternate universe. Cobra is just being founded now. He's getting in on the ground floor.
It's a relaunch of G.I. Joe with IDW, and that was one of the first titles that came out when G.I. Joe relaunched from IDW.
Well, maybe I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, that's an underhanded
every
recommendation.
Time we talk about Larry Hama, I think, because what I read that Larry Hama was writing is he wrote the Mark Texeira run of Wolverine.
Well, yeah, because
great stuff.
I remember when I heard that he was moving over to that, and I was like, "Oh, this guy freaking loves ninjas more than anything in the world. He should absolutely write Wolverine."
Yeah, and I mean that. Like the first time I saw Mark Texeira's art, I was floored. Yeah. It just blew my mind. Like he's still one of my favorite Wolverines ever. I've come to expand. It used to be like Jim Lee and Mark Texeira, best. No, I'm like, oh god, I can't believe I ever thought that way. I've totally kind of embraced other styles, but it's it. And I remember the Sabretooth miniseries he did that I thought was amazing, and I had it all at one point. And we're not going to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
We don't talk about that anymore.
Let's talk about recommendations.
Yeah,
recommendations.
Should I go first?
Go ahead.
It's kind of traditional.
So for this fortnight, I picked
fortnightly
John Constantine, Hellblazer, All His Engines. We've talked about Hellblazer, at least brought it up several times throughout the podcast, and I'm a huge Hellblazer fan. I used to own like the entire run, got stolen out of my car. I'm rebuilding it right now. But the hard thing about Hellblazer is they've never really collected it into trades well, so you kind of have to get it in single issues if you want all of them. And also, the other hard thing about Hellblazer is it's not really a fun like jumping in point to Hellblazer at any time. Like you can jump in when new artists and writers come on because they kind of start to tell like a little bit of a new story. But I really think that Hellblazer is the best when you read it from the beginning through all of it. So it's hard to recommend a Hellblazer book, but this is one of the Hellblazer books I think is easy for anyone to get into. It's a standalone graphic novel. It came out as a graphic novel. It was never in issues. And it's written by Mike Carey.
What is it called?
It's called Hellblazer, All His Engines. And Mike Carey, and then the artist is Leonardo Manco. And it is, it's really, really good. It's a good introduction to Constantine because it's the same kind of thing that happens to Constantine a lot. Because he is, like, in tune with the magical world or the supernatural world, however you want to call it, he's constantly getting people he knows into trouble. And either killing them somehow horribly or getting them out of some kind of magical malady or problem.
That has scarred them horribly forever.
Right. So if you don't know the character John Constantine, he's a British character who looks like David Bowie, who was invented in Alan Moore. Sting. It looks like David.
I think he looks like David Bowie or Sting, depending on.
Legend goes in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. Alan Moore created a character that looked like David Bowie because he wanted a character. He wanted to write a character that looked like David Bowie. I don't know if that's true or not, but he kind of in the early stuff he looks more like David Bowie than he does now.
Okay.
But yeah, so he's this British, kind of like aging punker. Sort of, like he was in a punk band, and I cannot remember the name of his band, but it's awesome.
They were a big band too. I mean, like he was famous for being in the band.
Sort of, I think. Well, he
achieved some kind of local fame.
It's kind of what started him off on this path too, because they were kind of a punk hardcore band, and they decided to summon a demon, and it kills all of them except for him. Right. And so he gets to walk away from that. Kind of fucked up because all his friends keep dying, because he, ever since he was a small child, has been able to see demons, ghosts, the supernatural. Like they just appear to him even when he's a child. And so he's not like a wizard or any kind of he doesn't shoot fireballs or that kind of magic. His magic is all knowledge based. Like he knows a lot about the supernatural, and that's what gets him out of these situations. Like he knows how to kind of outsmart a demon.
He pulls a lot of tricks.
Yeah, he's very
he's a slick talker.
Yeah, and the demons in hell know of him. Like they're like, don't fuck with John Constantine because he will trick you. Like he is as tricky as a demon. Yeah. So he's the only person that can outsmart a demon or something. And then that comes up in this book, which is great. Constantine often in the Delano run especially dealt with a lot of kind of pagan spiritual stuff, like ley lines and that kind of drawing from that Swamp Thing supernatural, nature supernatural of the natural world. And in the later runs he kind of gets tied more into the Christianity supernatural with hell and demons and Satan and angels and that kind of stuff, and that comes later in the run. But this is definitely that type of stuff. They're demons from hell, and they have inflicted, I think they gave his friend, it's Chaz is his friend, the cab driver who's been friends with for the longest time, one of the only friends of John Constantine who hasn't died a horrible death. He's sick. He has some kind of affliction that only John Constantine and some magic can save, and so he has to kind of go to America and figure out what's going on and why these people are getting sick and what's happening. And he has dealings with gross, disgusting demons, and something's fucking with his head too, as usual. He's got some kind of other demons, whether metaphoric demons or actual demons inside his head, kind of messing with him. So it's a great stepping on point to Constantine. I think this is one of the only standalone stories, and if there's another one that's in the DC Vertigo crime line that I cannot remember what it's called. Dark something, and I did not like that one at all. So as a Constantine fan, that one was a huge departure in my mind from the kind of stuff I like in Constantine. So if you're gonna pick up one of the two original graphic novel stories, standalone stories, I think it should be this one. All His Engines. It's really good. The art's fantastic. It's a great Constantine story.
Yeah, don't expect to read it and have warm and fuzzy feelings.
It's not.
Don't read it late at night.
Yeah.
Don't read it if you're depressed.
It's not oppressively dark, but it is
it's
dark on the level of somber. Just you don't feel good after you've finished.
He's not dealing with he's not.
It's not all sunshine. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for John.
This is not Jim Butcher Wizard for Hire. This is or the Steve not Steve Niles. What is it? The Cal McDonald.
That is Steve Niles.
It is Steve Niles. Yeah. Okay, yeah,
Criminal Macabre.
Criminal Macabre. That's what it is. Which is I think even a little. It's great stuff. I think it borders on the corny, but I think that's what makes it good. Hellblazer is really
rooted in reality. Yeah. Even though it's a DC book, it moved to Vertigo when they started that line, and it's very much been separated from the DC universe proper until right now.
And bringing him back into the main DC universe was just an amazingly good idea.
Well, he's never been in the DCU before. He's had ties to the DCU in Elseworld stories. He and Zatanna have a kid in
Crisis on Infinite Earths, wasn't he?
Yeah, only because all DC books were in Crisis.
He's around, and it's an accepted fact that he's around. Because he also ties into he also appears not prominently, pretty prominently or is mentioned prominently in the first Sandman trade too, and Sandman is very clearly taking place in the DC universe.
John's almost never, to my knowledge, shows up and talks to Superman or Martian Manhunter.
That first volume of Sandman was before Vertigo was a thing, and as soon as it was that and John Constantine and Swamp Thing that was what the founding of Vertigo was.
Right, Invisibles. Right.
I want to say Invisibles happened. I think it was
Animal Man for sure.
Doom Patrol.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, there were a number of those titles around, I want to say 87, 88.
Yeah, I think that's when Constantine.
Yeah,
all got started in the DC universe proper, and then got spun off into Vertigo.
Right. Yeah,
and so when you have things like in the first trade of Sandman, where he goes to Martian Manhunter for this lost artifact, Constantine almost never does that.
Yeah,
Constantine shows up in relation to other DC characters sometimes. He's in Sandman, he's in Swamp Thing, and he's in Books of Magic alongside Phantom Stranger, Mr. E.
Yeah, because he exists in that realm, but he's not.
He almost never ties in to Batman or Superman or anything. No. So it's very much rooted in a real, quote unquote, real world.
Yeah. And he's mostly dealing in Britain and places like that. But
and there's some awesome art and really awesome looking demons in this book. And I really like this one, so that's my recommendation. What do you got, Joe?
Good. I'm going to recommend. We mentioned it before. The first collection of what's his name, Michael Avon Oeming's and. What's his name? Bendis. Brian Michael Bendis' Powers.
Yeah.
Who Killed Retro Girl, which is I think probably the most solid story arc. I like them all through the 6th or 7th collection, but it's very similar to Gotham Central or a police procedural set in a world populated by superhero. It's Christian Power. What's his name? Dana. I can't remember their names.
You're doing a real good job, Joe.
I know his first name. It's Christian and Dana. I know that. Okay, I can't remember their last names right now. That's not important. You should just read the book if you're that hungry for knowledge. But it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
And it's them tracing the death of this superhero who was a public sweetheart type character, and it's interesting because I think it gets into aspects of these kind of superhero ideas that are not normally explored in comic books, and so private lives of superheroes and things like that. And I think Powers did it really in an interesting way and in a compelling way, and I think that the main characters remain compelling until they go batshit crazy in the 7th story arc or something.
And there's a point at which I just stopped reading Powers, not because it was bad, but just because it took a really long time to come out.
Yeah. Well, it's because it switched from Image to Icon, and then not exactly sure.
Bendis had signed a mutual agreement with Marvel,
so they had to bring it over or whatever. But they had created, between him and Oeming, they had created this whole universe. They had this whole, they created all these heroes and villains for it, and
you see a lot of them, even if it's just the face.
Yeah, exactly. Really an interesting and fleshed out world. Unfortunately, he kind of pulls a Dave Sims and starts going crazy and taking it entirely too seriously. But I think it's good. I think the first collection is solid. And I think it's a different, it's if you've been for people that have been reading superhero comics and maybe want to change up without kind of drastically leaving that milieu, I think it's a good call.
Well, it's superhero deconstruction, but without being destructive.
That way
exactly. That The Boys or Absolution, which is the book I've recommended before. or Kick-Ass or something. Like, it's deconstruction, but it's not to the same level that those books are. Well, it's more like on the same level of like Astro City and Powers are like kind of in that way where they're able to tell stories that couldn't be told in mainstream comics. Yeah. And not that they shouldn't be told in mainstream comics, but just that like they're kind of on the fringes of what people would want to read about who read mainstream comics. Absolutely. You know, the kind of the police procedural element of it is really awesome, but what makes it great in my mind is that it's still a really interesting superhero book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a solid book. I think it's a great read. I really like Oeming's art.
The art's fantastic. Yeah, really. It's very what I would call cartoony, but not in a negative connotation. It's thick, bold black lines, like very bold colors. Simplistic, but at the same time, like they've got great expressions. The art is really good, and I'm not really pitching it very well, but it is more simple.
It's this pulpy, cartoony. It's this.
I haven't actually read Powers, but I seem to remember it had, to my eye, like a very flat quality to it.
Yeah, it's very
like not a lot of texturing or.
Yeah. It's bold black lines. It's very heavily influenced by this kind of looks like 50s art style, square jaws, square shoulders. I think it's minimal. There's not a lot going on, but that's not a bad thing. It really suits the book a lot. I don't think it's well written. I think that it's some of the best Bendis stuff I've read.
Like Pensive Face and Smiley Face are only different by one
by a tiny little bit. But Dina Pilgrim, that's her name. Dina Pilgrim.
You have to note, dear listeners, that Joe is like pointing his finger right in my face.
I was pointing towards I meant to be pointing towards the microphone, which is this.
I don't believe that.
This fifth person over here, Dina Pilgrim. It's like Christian Bowers and Dina Pilgrim, I think, are the names of those.
That was really important. I'm glad that you remembered.
I love how accusatorial you say that.
Accused, Dina Pilgrim.
Oh my god.
All right. So yeah.
Cool. That's good job.
It's good stuff, and you should read it even if we don't pick it, because nobody's gonna.
We say that every week. I think they've figured that out by now.
Yeah,
they're not like, oh man, that book sounds so good. Oh, they didn't pick it. Fuck it, I'm not reading that.
Christian Walker and Dina Pilgrim are the two main characters. Awesome. There you go. Now you can sleep soundly.
Well, you can. I don't think anybody else was worried.
I'm not going to. I did a big old. I mean, like I'm not going to talk about my drug use.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't. Although we are sponsored once again by meth.
Meth. Ooh, meth. It's
All
true.
Right.
It's true.
Cade, what do you got for us?
Well, I brought this book as a joke to show people I don't care if you vote for my books or not, because I'm going to read it anyways, and half the fun of comics is reading the damn comic.
Yeah.
I brought the book, The Adventures of Barry Wheaton, Boy Genius. I had some others in mind, but we're doing a superhero thing, and I don't want to choose something that somebody's going to want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I brought a fun book. I absolutely love it. It's some of Judd Winnick's stuff from just after The Real World.
Yeah, it was right after
Pedro Man.
Pedro, yeah. It was his next book after that.
So it's very early cartoon strip kind of thing. Just funny as hell. A 10-year-old boy who's a genius and his best friends get into a lot of trouble because he's so damn smart.
It's like
Dexter's Laboratory.
And if like with a lot of Calvin and Hobbes thrown
it's like if you took Calvin and Hobbes, Dexter's Lab, and South Park and slammed them all together, you'd have some approximation of what it's like to read Barry Ween.
Yeah, and I love that you call this a joke book. You're like, oh, you just pick something fun. This is one of my favorite books ever.
It's seriously probably one of my top 5.
Really good.
I've probably read this at least 10 times.
Yeah,
and I feel
absolutely.
like
the books I have are falling apart because I've read them.
It's one of those books you read and you just, you laugh and you have a good time, and it's everything that I love about funny comics.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh, it makes me smile. The art is very funny.
It's witty. It's well written.
Witty, yeah.
It's hands down the best thing Judd Winnick has ever written, as far as I'm concerned, and it's
really good.
It's definitely in my top 5 favorite things to read, and he manages to get you. That's the thing. Is you'll be reading. and he'll get to the end. He'll get to a certain point, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, ding, like right in the feels. You know, it's unexpected, but it really showcases how talented he is. I mean, this book made me laugh out loud. Not a lot of things do. Like I chuckled to myself, but this book, like people were looking at me like.
Yeah, there's definitely jokes in the book where no matter how many times you've read them before, you get to them and you laugh. Like, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
I knew it was there and I didn't see it coming.
I have recommended this book to lots of people who absolutely hate comic books. And they come back to me and they're just like, that was funny. You got me more. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, it was really very sad.
Too short-lived.
One of the first things I started reading when I got back into comic books, and I remember the end of the fourth book is up there with the end of Transmetropolitan.
Yeah.
And a few other things. It is an amazing ending.
It's
really
book.
Sad that there's no more. It's like, I want more.
It appeals to so many people too. Yeah. When I worked at a comic book store, my boss is huge on this book. Like she absolutely loved it and would give it to anyone.
Yeah, she pretty much shoved it down my...
hundreds of copies of this book.
And it's,
in the 4 years I worked there. Like
Incognito isn't something that I would recommend to everybody. Barry Ween is something I would recommend to literally everyone.
If they, can handle the foul language and, like, gross sexual content, like...
If you've ever watched Kevin Smith movie and laughed, you will love Barry Ween.
You will love Barry Ween. I think that's fair.
It's dick and fart jokes.
Yeah. But done really well.
Yeah.
With great art.
Absolutely.
It's everything you could want in a funny comic, to be honest.
Absolutely.
It's probably, I can't think of a humor comic that I like more. Like, honestly, I don't think I can pick
one. It takes the best approach to, like, super science that I can think of, which is, I would explain it to you, but you wouldn't understand what I was talking about. Which is how it should, it's like, yes, I built a particle accelerator that fits under my bed. I can tell you how I did it. But you don't care. That's not what this is about.
It's not about that. It's about what you're going to do with the super science. Yeah.
You should bring books that you guys like more often, so I don't have to talk about it.
We did your pitch for you.
What's funny is that I mean, maybe I'm going to jinx myself here, but I'm guessing that we're not going to actually pick to read Barry Ween.
Well, we've all read it. We all have such fun. Like, I'm going to read it again when we pick it or not. But, we've all read it. Which is kind of a phenomenon. We don't pick a book that all of us have read. But highly recommended from all of us. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, you need to get out. If you love comic books, whatever this is, you need to get out and read Barry Ween because it is.
Although it would give us an excuse to talk about vaginas again.
We could talk more about vaginas.
That's true. I think we've been talking about doing some special edition podcasts, and I think we might have
vaginas.
I think we might have to set aside one for vaginas or for Barry Ween.
We definitely talk about dicks a lot more on here than we talk about vaginas. Mostly because Orkstein started a horrible trend for that.
Yeah, that was not a good call.
Oh, it's such a good book. I don't care what anyone says. I love that book.
I enjoyed it.
I love it till the day I
thought it was a little weird, but okay. I thought it was decent. It wasn't as good as King City.
I read the first issue, and I don't think I'm going to finish it.
Oh man, it gets so much better. He wrote the first. I say this on the podcast too, but he wrote the first issue, and then took like a year and a half off, and then wrote the rest of it. So like where the first issue kind of wanders, and the colors are not as solid, and the art is a little bit like looser. Everything gets like really tightened up, and the story doesn't really pick up until probably the third issue, I'd say. But after that, it's like, you can't not want to read it. I feel like it's just like grabs you in that kind of adventure mode where it's like, yeah, we're kind of milling around. Ready to go adventure, don't stop reading until the end of the book.
All right, well, maybe I'll pick it up over Christmas break or something.
I think it's
Here we go. I just want to read this review from Matt Wagner about Barry Ween. South Park meets Dexter's Lab in the smoldering aftermath of the real world without the interference of all those pesky censors.
Read the first one.
The first one is the best one because it's Garth Ennis. Barry Ween is Calvin and Hobbes on PCP with a copy of Mein Kampf thrown in the mix. Barry will take the comics by storm and tomorrow the world. So there you go. If you're into Calvin and Hobbes on really awful like psychedelic drugs, I don't know
horse tranks.
Like on horse tranquilizers
or meth
with a little bit of Hitler. On meth, our sponsor meth.
On our sponsor meth.
You got to plug that. Those
I got to get it in there. That's how we make all of the money that we make on this show.
Want a clean house? Meth.
Yeah. Want no teeth?
Want to avoid the dentist? Meth. Want to end up with your RV speeding down a desert road with 2 dead drug dealers in the back of your car? Meth.
So you guys always talking about Breaking Bad. I mean, I hate that show. That's not why we're sponsored by meth.
No.
It's because it pays the bills.
Indeed it does.
Anyway, yes. My recommendation this week is S.H.I.E.L.D. It was a miniseries about 2 years ago by Jonathan Hickman and Dustin Weaver.
This is Marvel's S.H.I.E.L.D., not to be confused with DC's S.H.I.E.L.D. that came out almost at the same time.
It was written by...
You mean The S.H.I.E.L.D.?
The S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, this is actually S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right.
Not like S.H.I.E.L.D., the word, S.H.I.E.L.D., the acronym.
Yeah.
Technically, this story takes place in the main continuity, although you wouldn't know it because nothing really references it, nor does it reference anything else. And one of the reasons that I'm picking it is that I really don't remember the story too well because it's kind of crazy and doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's really, really good. So it's kind of partly set in the 1950s. Howard Stark and Nathaniel Richards make kind of guest appearances. And it starts with the kind of proposition that S.H.I.E.L.D. as an organization has existed throughout all of human history and has always stood as kind of a bulwark against monsters. It kind of started when the Brood invaded in like ancient Egypt. And there's like a Celestial that invades at one point. Galactus shows up in like the Renaissance, and Galileo shoots him with a giant laser made out of telescopes. Like
he did that.
It really actually kind of in a similar way to Reed Richards will do in modern comics. Like they just shoot him with a big laser and he goes away.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah. And there's a war between Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton over the fate of this like immortal city that exists underneath Rome in secret. And Nikola Tesla has a super suit that he uses to travel through time. It's really pretty ridiculous, but just awesome in that way that some comics are, where you're just like, this is absolutely crazy. It makes no sense, and I love it.
Right.
I want to read more.
It's very Hickman-esque in its like Hickman craziness. Like he was also writing Secret Warriors at this time, and that had a lot of this kind of stuff in it too, where like these things have been happening for a really long time. There's a lot of things that have been going on in secret in the Marvel Universe that you haven't gotten to hear about yet, and I'm going to tell you about them. And if you like Hickman, and if you like Matt Fraction, because he does a lot of similar stuff with Iron Fist and with, Five Fists of Science and that kind of stuff, then I think you'll like this book. I think the art's also
the art is
phenomenal.
Really just absolutely amazing. Just all of the like primitive super tech gadgets. And the designs of the immortal city, and it's kind of good from start to finish.
I did not read the end of this because it was coming out in issues, and it is that kind of craziness where if you're reading it every month and you didn't just read the last issue right before you read the next one, you pick it up and you're like, wait, what? And I think this would really benefit from reading in the trade. So
and that's how I read it. And I think that there was actually like maybe a gap of a couple of months where an issue didn't come out.
Yeah.
I remember reading the beginning of it and going, this is amazing! And then the later issues came out and I was like, I had no idea what's going on!
Yeah, I did the
same
thing.
But I really want to read it again.
Yeah.
So that's my pick.
All right, so we did all 4, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't paying attention for any of your guys'. So I'm going to pick my own. No, I can't do that. Joe, what do you want to read?
I think S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
You had me at Nikola Tesla and power armor time traveling, which is not something he just said, but trust me, he said it before.
He has laser eye beams.
You're just icing on the cake now. So,
Cade, what do you want to read?
All of them?
Well, yeah. You can put one vote in each book. That's fair. No. Rule breaking.
I'm gonna say S.H.I.E.L.D.
I can't vote for my own, so I'm gonna toss Joe a bone. I'm gonna vote for Powers.
Nice. Well, this is hard because I want to reread Powers really badly. But I'm gonna go with S.H.I.E.L.D. too, because I definitely want to reread that as well. We've all read Barry Ween, highly recommended. Powers, also highly recommended. And I'm gonna think S.H.I.E.L.D. is gonna be the one I go with.
Try and borrow John Constantine from you.
Yeah, you should grab it.
I have never read John Constantine.
He's awesome.
It's dark.
I never have either, but I did write that down. So
you guys should both read.
I have some of Delano's stuff, which I love. Jamie Delano's.
Hellblazer is hard because it's not collected well.
Yeah,
it really suffers from the fact that like they'll put a few trades out by some authors, but there's lots of like fill-in issues in the middle, where it's just like Neil Gaiman will do one issue,
right?
And it's a standalone story, sort of. Like they're all kind of standalone stories, but at the same time, I think the series really benefits from reading it from the beginning and reading all of it. But that's just me being like.
I've gotten the sense that John Constantine is one of those characters like Conan, where you just kind of see sections of his life, and they're not necessarily in order, and so like there could be a story that's like earlier in his life and then later, and then you kind of bounce around, and you get a sense of him as an overall character, but it's not like there's a story with a beginning, middle, and end that is his life.
Right. Constantine is a bit more linear because Robert E. Howard wrote the Conan stories out of order.
Well, what Robert E. Howard did was he was like, I want to write a story about pirates, so here's a pirate Conan story, and now I want to write an Arabian story with a giant bat, and here's Conan doing that. And he just kind of
took all amazing.
Him as a character and put him in whatever situation he wanted to write.
And then later fans have like gone back and put them in an order.
Much like the Cthulhu mythos. Yeah, a lot of the structure that exists is something that was kind of backfilled in later.
Right. And same thing with early Golden Age comics too. Yeah. Like there's not really like the fans determined when it was no longer Golden Age and when it became Silver Age and stuff. So like a lot of that fills in. But Constantine is a bit more linear than Conan.
Oh yeah.
In that like things that happen in early Delano runs like are mentioned in later runs. Like they definitely happened at some point, but there is a lot of ambiguity of like, is this right after that happened? Is it like 20 years? Like when are these events like exactly taking place? But it is slightly linear in that I have no idea where this one fits in though, because it is kind of a standalone story. I'm not exactly sure, but
all right. So 2 weeks from today, S.H.I.E.L.D.
And then also I'm gonna jump in here real quick because we're gonna do a special edition.
Yeah, some kind of holiday
edition. We're gonna do a holiday edition, which we're gonna do a superhero special edition.
Is it gonna be our first bonus episode?
I think it's gonna be our first bonus episode.
We'll probably leave it in the same numbering just because of iTunes. Maybe I know.
No, I don't think
we don't need to do that. Okay,
no.
it'll be a bonus episode.
No, it's gonna be it'll be a bonus episode, and we're all gonna come in and we're gonna talk about superhero books that have or runs on superhero characters that have to us kind of epitomized what is right about superhero comics and what moves us about superhero comics.
What we love about comics, in general, but specifically about superheroes.
Because I think a lot of us, and Tobiah is maybe somewhat the exception, but superhero comics were the first comics I read.
Yeah. I mean, they were not the first comics I read, to be honest. The first comics I read were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Sonic the Hedgehog, but...
Well, I still think... Well, okay, all right.
But I read superhero comics, but it was spotty. Like, I'd grab random issues of Spider-Man.
Yeah. Right.
Or I'd, like, read my mom's comics, and she had, like, original run of, like, Adam Warlock and Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Right.
And, like, weird stuff that wasn't really superheroes.
Yeah, and I would pick up, like, randam issues of Batman and Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and
see,
X-Men,
I would too.
Yeah.
But it was Jim Lee, it was X-Men in the early 90s that
that was Jim Lee.
Yeah, it was Jim Lee.
It was Jim Lee and wasn't it Chris?
It was Chris Claremont
coming back.
Yeah, it was, and it was the wedding of Scott Summers and Jean Grey.
Oh man,
definitely got to get all 4 versions of that with the chromium covers.
I only had one. I did have quite a chromium cover collection though.
But I got a little sick. I was 16. I just got a little sick hearing chromium covers. It just made me shiver in a way.
I had my first job, but this is all stuff. So bonus episode because
we love superheroes.
You, the imaginary listener, have stuck with us for you don't even know how long because we don't even know how long.
We have no idea.
13 episodes.
Yeah,
13 whole episodes.
You definitely went back and listened to all of them, right?
Yeah. Well, the ones that I'm on are the most important ones.
You're not on any of them. Remember, I edit you out.
Right.
Imaginary person that wasn't talking.
Speaking of which, my podcast, An Angry Man Having a Conversation with Himself, will premiere next week.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yes.
Later.
Ta-ta.
Bye.
Peace.